Hey, it's Freitag. In this podcast, we interview business owners in New Hampshire and beyond to get their perspective on work, growth, and of course, the weekend. Join our host, Freitag marketing owner Jan Ziegler, as he interviews fascinating guests. We hope you'll enjoy this episode.
Hi, it's Jan with It's Freitag, and today I have Becky Beaton here, who's the executive director at 100 Nights in Keene. Welcome, Becky.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And Becky and I know each other from the Leadership Monadnock program that we're both in, which is a really fun experience. And I have Becky here today to tell me a little bit about what she does at 100 Nights and how she got to be here in the first place.
Sure. So where do you want me to start? Talking about 100 Nights or?
Well, why don't we start? So I stalked your LinkedIn like I do and realized that really your entire experience is in banking in one shape or form or another. How I feel like 100 Nights is very different than whatever you did before.
It definitely is very different. So I did start in banking. I was doing commercial lending, commercial loan underwriting, did that for about 15 years in actual banks. It was very community bank centered. And I was always part of the group at the bank that did the outreach. My passion is always to work with community service. So the volunteer hours, making sure that we were part of the community, which is huge with community banks. They do it a lot around here too, which is great. I sat on several boards for nonprofits, so I got a feel for what it was to be a nonprofit organization. And in 2020, which we all know was that super fun year, I have been part of my church's food program. We deliver food to kids during school breaks. And so when in 2020 all the schools closed, our concern was, are these kids going to get fed? So I became very quickly the program coordinator for that program and have been ever since. So 5 years later, I'm still coordinating. We serve about 120 kids at our peak. And just knowing that food insecurity and housing insecurity really go together, I did a lot more, looking into the problems and seeing what was going on.
So the food program you've been running is out in Ringe, or where is that located?
Yes. So the food program is in Ringe. That's where I live. And it covers Jaffrey and Ringe. So the Jaffrey Ringe Cooperative School District is our group of children that we serve. So if you qualify as a school-age child in either of those two towns, then you qualify for our program. So
that's really cool. And then I assume 100 Nights needed a new executive director, and you saw it and you're like, well, this is a lot more fun than banking.
Yeah. I don't know if fun is necessarily the right word. I think I was feeling that I wasn't really having my cup filled by doing lending. So I was looking for something. I was looking for something in New Hampshire. My entire career has been in Massachusetts, but I've always lived in New Hampshire. So I thought I would love to work at home, or not from home per se, but in my own home state. And so I was looking for something. I actually am getting my master's degree in community development through UNH. And on their weekly, monthly, whatever it is, newsletter at the bottom, it's jobs in New Hampshire nonprofits. So caught my eye and happened to find the position posted on that. And that's how I found it.
That's really cool. So before you started working here in Keene, was Keene, the Monadnock region, sort of on your map, or did you kind of orient yourself more towards Mass with life?
So I think, unfortunately, I got pulled into Massachusetts more just because I was down there. But I would say that whenever I had the chance, I would come up to Keene. My husband has some family up here, so we'd come visit and hang out with them. My kids play sports, so we'd be in Keene, unfortunately competing against them, but we would be in Keene for stuff like that. So we weren't always out of the Monadnock area, but unfortunately, you get out of work and you're down in Massachusetts. I was working in Leominster. You get pulled into a Leominster restaurant, and that wasn't as much fun as being up here.
Fair. And so tell me a little bit about 100 Nights. So you guys are the only shelter?
Nope. So there's actually, technically 3 shelters in Keene. One of them is the Monadnock Center for Violence Prevention. So they have a very focused purpose dealing with families and women coming out of domestic violence situations. However, us, 100 Nights and Southwestern Community Services, we both have shelter services. We are a low barrier shelter, and we have 48 beds, and then they have, I believe it's 42 beds in the city of Keene. So together we're providing a good amount of beds, but not nearly enough, really. So
What would enough look like? How big is the discrepancy? I'm just curious.
So definitely we are seeing, we have the overnight warming center this time of year, and we're seeing about 20 to 25 people every night that aren't getting beds. The city has additional people that they're putting up in hotel rooms, and I know Southwestern has additional. I don't know exactly what their numbers are in addition to ours, but I would say another 40 beds still wouldn't be enough.
Okay. So the need's definitely big, and especially now, I mean, it's cold out. We're in February, so it's cold outside. And so in your position as the director, like, what do you do every day? You know, I simplified it earlier, and I was like, we chatted a bit, and I was like, well, is it just like opening the door? But I'm sure there's a million other things that go into it. So maybe you can...
Sure. So my role has really been just kind of making sure everything's still running. I oversee our staff. I make sure that our programs are going. I'm working with our donors and making sure they see what we're doing every day. Working with my development manager to make sure that we've got fundraising happening, planning the events. But day to day, 100 Nights is... I guess right now we're technically 24/7 because of the overnight warming center. So there's no opening the door. It's just kind of always open right now. But it's making sure that there's a place for people to go during the day, as well as the beds that we have overnight.
Okay. And so sort of, are you typically like year round open during the day, or do you usually close for the day in the summer when it's warmer outside? Or?
So for the Kingsbury Resource Center is open every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We open at 7 a.m. to serve breakfast. We have a lunch there as well. And then we close to the public at 5 o'clock on weekdays. And we have a meal for our guests who are staying overnight. And then on weekends, we stay open till 6:30 and actually provide dinner to anyone in the community as well. So the reason we close at 5 on weekdays is because the community kitchen, who we actually partner with, they provide dinner to the community. So we don't have to be open to everybody. There's another resource.
That's really cool. And so is there, I would assume, because a lot of people that are your clients also touch base with, you know, the other resources that we have. Is there a lot of, you know, interaction between, you know, Community Kitchen you just mentioned you partner with, but like all the other organizations, like lots of coordination going on in terms of addressing the needs? Or?
Definitely. So we have a case manager on staff, and her biggest thing is connecting people with everything that they need. So we work with the Monadnock Developmental Services, MDS, if we have individuals who need that support. We work with Monadnock Family Services for mental health support. We actually have MAPS Counseling Service. We have a partnership with them. We have one of their counselors comes in every week on Monday for a few hours and is there for drop-in hours for our guests. Community Kitchen, as we mentioned, we partner with for meals. They actually provide us with the food for dinner Monday through Friday, and then we're partnering so that we're providing food over the weekend together in a way. So
that's really cool.
So much more.
No, but I mean, that's really cool. And I can see how you're very busy interacting with all of those organizations and making everything happen and coordinating. What do you think in a grander scheme, like for Keene, for the Monadnock region, other than like, obviously there's not enough beds, like what are the big challenges for the community right now that you're seeing that you feel like need to be addressed?
Yeah, so I would say housing. I mean, we wouldn't have the need for shelter beds if we had enough housing. I also would suggest that, you know, the housing that we do needs to fit, you know, the demographics that we have. I think New Hampshire in general is an aging population, so looking at more of that elderly housing, 55 plus communities, so that the houses that those individuals are, for lack of a better term, stuck in because there isn't somewhere else for them to move to, those can then become available to families that are growing. So that sort of mismatch. I think the other big thing is mental health. Our guests, that's what we call the people who stay with us, whether they come in for the day or overnight, they're either already experiencing mental health before they come to the shelter, or becoming homeless can create this mental health crisis in and of itself. So it's a traumatic event. So having more mental health services, I think we're just tipping, the tip of the iceberg there when it comes to those services.
And compared to like Massachusetts, for example, New Hampshire has a lot less, right? I mean, we do tax less here, I guess, but also services are severely less than in Massachusetts or Vermont.
Yeah, I would say maybe compared to Vermont, we might be on par. I think Massachusetts, especially when you get closer to the cities, and that's another thing. Keene is a city. So we do have the services here, but we also are a rural city, and we're in a very rural area. So once you leave Keene, the services go away almost completely for some of the things that we're talking about. So when you look at Massachusetts, there's a lot more cities, there's a lot more metropolitan areas too. So the services are more readily available in those places.
Yeah, I think about this a lot with Keene because obviously all the surrounding tiny little towns, they don't have these issues because nobody would ever, there's nowhere to go. So everybody flocks to Keene when they're in need probably, and then, I don't know what's the next, probably maybe Hillsborough or something like that, like a town that's like of a decent size, before you get to Manchester and Concord and Nashua. So what are the big challenges that you're working on, for this year? And we're in the beginning of the year that you want to, maybe it's your first full year, I think.
Yeah,
April
will
will
be 1 year.
So what are the plans for the year for you? Like, what are some goals that you set yourself for the organization?
Yeah, so building on the partnerships we already have for mental health for sure are a big one of our focus points that we're really honing in on. Because I'm getting my degree, I'm actually working on a project doing some research around transitional housing options. We're meant to be an emergency, short-term, immediate, low barrier type of shelter, but what's happening is there's a gap in what people need, and people are starting to stay longer. And if they stay longer, there's less opportunity for that emergency need being covered. So trying to do that research around what else can we create, what else is needed, and how do we do that? How do we offer that to kind of step people through the process from being chronically homeless to being suddenly housed isn't the right step. There's some steps in between that. So.
Yeah, I mean, the explosion in housing prices and housing affordability in the last 5 years here it sets the income threshold that you need to, just afford housing in Keene, even though it's, a very basic apartment, so high that it's really hard to get out of that once you're in it, I would assume, because the income you need to make housing at all affordable.
Yeah. So I think some statistics that I actually was listening to this weekend from one of our partners statewide, you have to be making almost $72,000 a year to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in the state of New Hampshire. Each county is a little bit different, but just sort of statewide. But the average is only 53, I think is like 53,000. So there's a huge gap right there. Even if you're making that kind of money, a lot of people are seeing that so HUD is where we get all of our statistics from. And they set it as 30% of your income is what you should be paying for your housing. People are paying more than half of their income to pay for their housing. Yeah. So people are already what we like to call housing poor because they've already spent too much money just on their housing. And so then you have to give up something else. And the things that have to get given up are going to be your car, so you can't get to your job. They're going to be your food. We have food insecurity. Or they're going to be like healthcare. So there's so many things that people end up having to give up. It's not enough to just not have a cell phone. It's not enough to just not pay for Netflix. It doesn't cover those costs. Yeah. So it is a big crisis. And if you're not making that much, because who is, not many people are in that level, then what?
Yeah. And I think and especially because especially here in Keene, the amount of large scale apartment buildings that, really could be very affordable housing. There's a lot of building and development happening, but there's still I mean, this is an area of the single family home with, some multifamily houses here in Keene, but like it's just very expensive. And I think even for people that make good money, you look at housing, you're like, oh my God, it's expensive.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't, frown on that completely because it's expensive to build.
Yeah.
So you have to charge more to have, people in those housing. But it's sort of this crisis that's been coming because housing has been so slow to keep up with demand that we're just falling behind even more. I think they say a healthy vacancy rate's about 5%. And we're at 0.6. So we're basically don't have anything available.
And so are a lot of the clients that are coming in like new to, home, like housing insecurity or homelessness, like is that a lot of people facing that for the first time because they just get behind, can't catch up, and suddenly they're faced with that?
I would say it's a pretty even mix. Chronic homelessness, those people who have been homeless for a long time or many times within the past 3 years, that's, still taking up a big piece of it because sort of once you become homeless, it's really hard to come back out of that sometimes. But yes, I would say that, we're seeing, I would say the city, and the towns are sort of the first to see those because that's where people should go first as their own welfare department in their own hometown. And so what we're seeing is more families. Individuals is probably staying like a pretty even mix as it's always been, but what we're seeing is a lot more families. COVID was great with all of the money that came in and helped people stay in their housing. And once that dried up and all of the moratoriums on evictions happened, it kind of just spiraled from there. So there's a lot more families facing homelessness.
Yeah, which is really crazy that like in a rural area with more than one income, like it makes it so clear how terribly expensive it is to afford housing.
Yeah.
Anyways, well,
not to bring it down.
Not to bring it down. I was just going to say, now on a lighter note, I think it's really cool how you made this switch from, banking and like being in the community engagement, which, Savings Bank of Walpole, they do a lot. All the local banks do a lot in the community, and they're like this integral part of how the volunteering works and obviously fund a lot of things. But how can the people that, listen to this, how can they get involved, help? Is it volunteering? What do you recommend? Where does one start? If I said, Becky, okay, you have my attention. This is clearly a huge issue.
Yeah.
What should I do?
So I think there's sort of two different ways. If you're a hands-on kind of person, you can come in and we have work that can be done. As a nonprofit, we always welcome volunteers to do the work that normally we'd have to pay for. So, and if it's a little bit more, fun that you're looking for in your volunteering, we have meals. So we do serve, 3 meals a day. So being able to help us put together a meal. If you're someone who likes to talk to people, advocacy is huge. Telling the story, sharing what's going on, making sure that you're not turning a blind eye. Just because you didn't, quote unquote, see it doesn't mean it's not happening. But knowing what's going on, telling people, sharing that. And then, shameless plug, we have our fundraisers. So we have the amazing race scheduled for September 20th. Make a team. It's a team of 2. It's a fun race, and there's some challenges involved. And so that's another great way to get involved with what we're doing, at least.
Awesome. Thank you. I think I love these, races as fundraisers. I think it's a really cool way because I think there's always a good turnout too. Like the Keene Senior Center did that runway 5K last year, I think, and they got a really good turnout too. So it's awesome.
Yeah. Try to be active, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like just guilt trip people into exercising. Cool. So in the second part of our podcast, we always talk a little bit about sort of what a good weekend looks like and kind of, here in the Monadnock region, what you love doing. And I know you have 2 teenagers.
Scary thought, right?
So I assume they just do their own thing. But what do you do on a weekend in Ringe?
I won't lie, and we don't usually stay in Ringe. We tend to come up to Keene. We'll, go out to eat. My boys are active soccer players, so we actually are participating in the Swansea, the field house that they have there. We participate in their winter soccer. I am the coach. I kind of got roped into that this session. I don't I've never played a sport before in my life, so I'm very much just making sure each kid gets a turn, kind of like I'm the mom on the sideline, right? Like they're making the plays and I'm just like, okay, he needs to go in now. So we do that, and then we usually end up at, one of the a local restaurant for our lunch or dinner.
Any favorites?
Oh, that's a hard one. My kids really like the Grill. Definitely have to go there on a regular basis.
Do you sound like that's not your choice?
I do like it. Okay. I do. But I also would love if there was maybe like a vegetable on the menu.
That's right. Like meat and maybe a little bit of...
It's meat and a little bit more meat. So I'm definitely like someone who likes a well-rounded meal. Yeah. So I don't know. I've liked all of them that I've gone to be quite honest. So.
Okay. Cool. Well... Anything else? What do you do for yourself when you're not coaching soccer? Maybe wasn't. As
a parent, I don't know if I have my own. No, no. I have. Me and my girlfriends will go out. The Keen Pride organization has done a couple of different events. They do the brunches every once in a while. That's always a fun thing to do.
Cool.
Yeah, it's just going out with some friends.
That sounds fun. Well. Thank you so much for being here and being part of this. I really appreciate your time.
Yes,
I know you're very busy. Anything, like any kind of contact information, where can people find 100 Nights if they want to volunteer, donate, race, anything?
Sure. So I would say go to our website, 100nightsinc.org, and it's the word 100 spelled out. And it's the word night, meaning overnight, not like knight in shining armor. Just want to make sure people understand that. We post everything that we can on there or on our social, anything that you're looking for. So that's how you can find us.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, that was a great conversation. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave us a nice review wherever you're listening to this. It really means the world. Our episodes drop every other Friday, so stay tuned for more insightful chats from It's Freitag.